What if the Bible's most terrifying creature wasn't just lurking in the ocean, but stalking the edges of human history, morality, and free will? What if the Leviathan, yes, that Leviathan, was both a beast and a mirror? Was it real? Could it be found? And why does Scripture call it unbeatable, only to say that God plays with it as if it's nothing? Today, we're going to untangle one of Scripture's most haunting mysteries by reading the text as the ancient authors intended, in Hebrew, and by tracing the creature's twofold life, first as a physical creation and then as a spiritual symbol that explains why evil exists, why it feels invincible, and why it ultimately ends. Leviathan isn't a fringe concept. The Hebrew Bible names it directly 5 times, once in the book of Job, twice in Psalms, and once in Isaiah, plus an under-the-radar appearance in Genesis where it's hinted at under a different name. In Genesis, on the 5th day of creation, the text says that God made the tanninim gedolim, the great sea creatures. In many modern translations, that phrase gets smoothed out, sometimes even rendered as sea monsters or great sea creatures. But in the Hebrew, it's tanninim, a word that ancient commentators consistently link to the Leviathan. In other words, right there in the opening chapter of the Bible, before humans even walk the earth, a primordial giant is formed in the deep. That sets up a puzzle, because when you follow Leviathan through Scripture, you find verses that seem to pull in opposite directions. In Job, God describes the Leviathan as so powerful that no person could possibly capture or defeat it. In Psalm 104, the same Bible says God formed Leviathan to play in the sea, almost like a toy moving through the waves. And in Isaiah, God unsheathes a great sword and promises to punish and destroy Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, the twisting serpent, the sea dragon. Is it terrifying or harmless, a pet or a threat, a literal monster or a metaphor for something we can feel but not see? Let's take them one by one. Start with Genesis. Day 5 is the day of birds and sea life, the realm of waters and the creatures that glide over and through them. Among those, the text singles out something unique, tanninim gedolim, the massive sea beings who appear and then, mysteriously, disappear from the story. Many classical Jewish commentators, reading closely in Hebrew, explain that these tanninim are the Leviathan, and they add a curious note. No other creature in the creation story is treated with such awe that God would, in a sense, remove it from the world's ordinary cycle. Why? Hold that thought. Fast forward to Job, where the description turns vivid, cinematic, even frightening. God is addressing Job directly, revealing his power by pointing at what Job could never subdue. Can you catch Leviathan with a hook? Can you tie its tongue with a cord? If you lay a hand on it, you'll remember the struggle and never try again. Expecting to conquer it is an illusion. Its jaws are ringed with terrifying teeth. Its back is armored in impenetrable rows of scales, tight as a shield wall, so snugly joined the air can't pass between them. Its breath flashes with light. Its eyes blaze like the eyelids of dawn. From its mouth leap sparks like burning embers. Smoke pours from its nostrils as from a cauldron on a fire of reeds. Its heart is hard like stone. On earth, Job hears nothing equals it, a creature without fear. It looks down on the proud and is king over all the haughty. Listen to what that actually means. In Job, the Leviathan isn't a mere animal. It's a force that breaks the human illusion of mastery. Why would Job ever want to fight a sea creature as if he was some ancient harpooner? Because the passage is doing more than zoology. It's showing Job and us what ungovernable power looks like, how it feels to face something you can't manipulate, outthink, or outmuscle. The 5th day gave us birds and marine life, yes, including dangerous creatures like crocodiles and great fish. But the portrait in Job outgrows any natural specimen. The text is deliberately overwhelming, pushing past natural history and into the realm of meaning. Then Psalm 104 surprises us. There's the vast sea with its swarming life, small and great, the ships going to and fro, and there, moving through the deep, is the Leviathan that God formed to play in it. Play with the same creature Job couldn't even scratch. The contradiction is the point. From where we stand, evil and chaos are unassailable. From where God stands, they're on a leash. Now Isaiah 27 speaks with a sword in hand. In that day, the Lord will punish Leviathan the fleeing serpent, Leviathan the twisting serpent. He will slay the sea dragon that is in the sea. Now Leviathan is explicitly called a serpent, swift, coiling, aquatic, and God vows to bring it down. If God created it, why punish it? Why would God avenge himself upon one of his own works? Because Isaiah is not just picturing an ancient sea monster. He's mapping the world of spirit onto the stage of history. This is where we need to understand how the Bible thinks. God creates physical things and he creates spiritual realities, angels like Michael and Gabriel, for example. And often, the physical world points to spiritual truths, the same way the Bible talks about waters above and waters below, and how Proverbs can use water as a symbol for wisdom. Let all who are thirsty come to the water, the sages say, not literally parched, but thirsty for knowledge, for truth. Ecclesiastes explicitly tells us we are body and spirit, we are flesh and soul. Physical realities often have spiritual counterparts, and spiritual truths often take on physical forms in Scripture so that we can see them, feel them, and remember them. Leviathan stands exactly at that crossing point. Physically, Genesis marks it as part of creation on day 5, but spiritually, Leviathan becomes the face and form of something else. The principle of evil and pride and chaos that runs through human history. That's why Job's description lingers on smoke from the nostrils, an ancient image of blazing anger, on biting teeth, on scales that can't be pierced, on dazzling eyes, on embers and sparks. Each trait hints at a different way evil operates. The smoke of rage that clouds judgment, the fangs of malice that tear relationships, the scales of self-justification that make a heart impenetrable to correction, the flash of allure that blinds and misleads, the sparks of contagion that spread destructiveness like wildfire. No single animal checks all those boxes because the point is not biological taxonomy. The point is moral anatomy. And this is crucial. The existence of evil is not an accident in the Bible. If everything were good and easy, there would be no room for real choice. Free will requires alternatives. The Leviathan is the painted shape of that alternative, the presence of real opposition, real temptation, real threat. God made a world that allows us to choose the good, which means he made a world in which the opposite can pull at us. That's why Job is told no human can beat Leviathan alone. You and I can't muscle our way past evil by willpower or pride. That only feeds it. But in the very same scriptures, God makes clear that he is not threatened by it. Psalm 104 says, in effect, what looks unplayable to you is play to me. To humans, Leviathan feels like a storm swallowing ships. To God, it's a small, contained piece on the board, moved where he wills. So why do archaeologists never find Leviathan's bones? Why no fossil that unmistakably matches Job's portrait? Because the Bible isn't filing a laboratory report. Some have suggested candidates, a crocodile, a whale, a mosasaur, but every candidate falls short of the textual grandeur. And that's exactly the point. The text is layering symbolism over physical imagery so that we understand both levels at once. There may have been a literal creature behind the imagery. Genesis certainly speaks of the great sea beings, but the prophetic and poetic texts make the spiritual the main event. This too explains Isaiah's verdict. punish Leviathan is the Bible's way of saying God will judge and end evil. It's anthropomorphic language. God doesn't lose his temper like a person. The vengeance of God is a human way of describing the day when pride and cruelty and chaos are removed, when their time is up and they are cast down. The prophetic promise is that in the end of days, in the messianic future, the world will be rid of the malice that now feels welded into it. The sea serpent will be cut down. The proud will no longer rule. What Job could never do by hand, God will do by decree. But what about Genesis's physical Leviathan? Ancient Jewish sources add a stunning detail. God set apart the Leviathan from ordinary creation. Some midrashic and mystical texts describe how God prevented it from multiplying and reserved it for a purpose beyond the present world's order. And the Zohar goes further. At the culmination of history, God will prepare a feast for the righteous from the Leviathan. What does that mean? Not a carnival sideshow, but a revelation. The people who, with God's help, resisted the pull of evil, the ones who refused to bow to idolatry, who kept the biblical precepts even when mocked or pressured, who overcame the Leviathan's glare and growl, those people will one day eat the Leviathan. They will transform what once threatened them into nourishment. Their enemies, temptations, and trials will end up as the very substance of their joy. The battle that demanded courage and faith will become the banquet that celebrates victory. It's a powerful image. Think of it like this. All your life, the Leviathan tries to bite, bind, and blind. It offers shortcuts, stokes rage, whispers, "You can't help it." And every time you choose truth, mercy, humility, and faithfulness instead, with God's strength, you take a bite out of the beast. In the end, the feast simply makes visible what your choices were already doing, day by day. Not because you defeated it by yourself, Job warns you can't, but because you let God break the creature that breaks people. You let God's wisdom flood where arrogance would dam the water. In that future, evil won't exist in the world anymore. The serpent of the sea will be no more. The pride that struts will kneel. The world will be made new, and Leviathan will pass into memory. And that takes us back to Psalm 104's gentle line, to play in it. When Scripture says God plays with Leviathan in the sea, it doesn't mean God toys with suffering or treats evil as a game. It means that from his vantage, even the most fearsome powers are limited, contained, and made to serve larger purposes. What terrifies us is trivial next to him. What threatens us is on a leash in his hand. The God who set boundaries for the sea sets boundaries for the serpent within it. The same creator who separated the waters above from the waters below separates what is destructive from what he will use for good. This is also why so many details in Job are emotionally precise. Smoke from the nostrils, anger that overheats the mind, teeth, predation, the delight in devouring, scales sealed like shields, the shell a person grows when pride makes apology impossible, eyes bright as dawn, the way temptation sparkles like morning light on waves, promising a path that is really a plunge. Sparks and embers, the viral spread of cruelty when people imitate each other's worst impulses. God lets Job feel the terror of it. Then God says, "See, you can't beat that alone." It's spiritual literacy through poetic realism. So where does that leave us? First, with a clear answer to a provocative question. Has the terrible animal of the Bible been found? Not by archaeologists, not in a museum case. The physical Leviathan, whatever its original form, was taken out of the ordinary flow of creation's story for a reason. The Leviathan that matters most now lives where it always did, in the deep waters of human choice and history, as the emblem of evil's strength, and more importantly, of God's mastery over it. To find it, you don't comb the ocean floor. You watch a tyrant topple, a cruel ideology collapse, or a person break the cycle of rage in their own home. You watch a proud heart become soft. You watch the uncatchable get caught by grace. Let me pause and bring you into this. Which biblical image of Leviathan grips you most? The armored scales, the smoking nostrils, the blazing eyes, or the idea that God plays with it? Do you read Leviathan as a literal creature, a symbol of inner battles, or both? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And if this exploration is opening new doors for you in how you read the Bible, through the Hebrew, through layers of meaning, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next deep dive. Now, to put all the pieces in order, Genesis tells us there was a physical creation that became a signpost. Job teaches us that human strength fails before this power. Psalms teaches us that divine strength does not. Isaiah promises that evil's time is limited and its end is sure. The wisdom literature reminds us that water can mean wisdom, that we are body and soul, that the world is a double exposure of physical events and spiritual realities. The Zohar's image of a feast completes the arc. The righteous will not merely survive evil, they will be nourished by the transformation of their trials into joy. In the messianic future, the serpent will be slain, the proud will be humbled, and the seas that once hid monsters will reflect a calm sky. So, was Leviathan real? In the way that matters most, yes, real enough to tempt, to terrify, to test, and ultimately to be overturned. Was it an animal? Genesis says God made the great sea creatures. The text honors the physical, but Scripture keeps pointing us higher. The where of Leviathan isn't a GPS coordinate. It's a condition, and the end of Leviathan isn't a harpoon. It's the day when God removes evil from the world. Until then, the Leviathan both terrifies and teaches. It shows us the limits of our power and the reach of God's. It warns us that anger and pride, left unchecked, harden into armor no argument can pierce. And it whispers a better ending, where the sea is still and the behemoth is gone, where the faithful gather at a table and feast on what once tried to feast on them. That's the mystery unraveled, a creature created, a symbol revealed, a power restrained, a promise kept. Not a monster to hunt, but a meaning to live by, until the day the last wave falls quiet and the Leviathan passes from terror into tale.